Here, let's see if I can make this actually work. So who am I? I am Jean Roberts. I'm Field Chief Technology Officer for DataRobot, specializing in financial markets. I have a PhD in strategy and applied stats with 17 years of experience in finance, 10 years of which were within data science, and several years of leading data engineering and DevOps teams. I've transformed 5 organizations with artificial intelligence and machine learning, 3 of them using DataRobot. I've spent almost all of my career in finance in a variety of companies, functions, and businesses, including fixed income, equities, investment banking, insurance, payments, real estate, and people analytics. I've experienced the challenges of scaling machine learning and artificial intelligence in highly regulated industries and the sensitivity around protected data. Even though I'd been working in finance for years before I began working with data science, I was fully licensed. I had a Series 7, I had a Series 63, and a Series 24. The problems didn't magically go away. IT didn't just hand me the keys to their castle. Often I had to build the castle myself. Along the way, I learned enough data engineering and DevOps architectures that I could build the kingdom I needed for the types of problems we needed to solve. As a leader, I had to figure out where I needed to focus my limited resources, where we needed to build our own, and where we needed to outsource. I came to DataRobot because this is the platform that has worked for me over the past 4 years. I was hitting the same brick walls you are hitting with small teams, limited resources, and entrenched IT infrastructure that didn't serve our needs. I want to spend our time today talking to you about the problems I faced as I tried to scale our efforts from experimentation to production to evidence-based decision-making. Today, I'm going to chat about determining your unmet architectural needs, deciding how to meet them, cultural change management, and finally, how automation solves some of these issues for me. So when you first come into an organization and you're given a mandate to scale AI and ML, the first thing you do is take stock of your infrastructure and try to figure out what can actually be used. As most of you know, regardless of what industry you're in, your company's infrastructure is likely a hot mess express. It's homegrown systems that don't talk to each other, they lack documentation, they often break. Historically, we had to build the entire thing ourselves over time to keep the business functioning, but it wasn't actually built for data science. As data leaders, it's our responsibility to take a look at our OpEx costs. What's the cost to deliver this functionality? We don't need to build everything anymore. There are options outside. So after kicking the tires of your infrastructure, you're inevitably going to come to the conclusion that the architecture you need to do AI and ML doesn't exist at your firm. And you're going to wonder how you can achieve scale across the AI ML value chain with limited people resources and no existing architecture to help you. It's really scary when you get to this point. I've been there and I've been really worried about delivering what I need to deliver without having any of the resources or expertise to do so. I remember spending nights learning Kubernetes and Docker and trying to roadmap the build out of the necessary functionality for my team. I'm seeing some smiles, so I'm assuming that some of the rest of you have had to do the same thing where you're cribbing on Stack Overflow and trying to figure out what to do. So over the course of standing up and leading teams, I found this process. This is what I think the best way to describe the end-to-end data science process is. It's this 9-stage process. And you have to figure out like what infrastructure you need to buy and what you want to build yourselves. So you have data ingest, data prep, feature selection, reduction, and engineering, modeling, model interpretation and iteration, visualization of results, productionizing and industrializing the model, deploying the model, documenting the model, measuring drift over time, and retraining the model. So any guesses as to how long that entire process takes, like on average? 2 months? Anyone think 2 months? 6 months? A year? 11 months is average, so whoever said close to a year was right. So on average, 11 months from inception to deployment, which is at this point, are you really solving a problem anymore? If you built a model that takes 11 months to deployment. Any ideas on the cost difference between that average 11-month model cycle time and if you reduced it to 2 months? $10,000, $50,000, $100,000. if you take into account the data scientist's salary plus compute plus the fractional cost of the other people who need to be involved, it's a $130,000 cost difference, which is pretty crazy. Any guesses as to how many of those AI projects die before they actually reach the end of the process? 90. If it's 90, we're all in a lot of trouble. It's 2 out of 3. So 90, 90 is an overshot, but it does feel like that, doesn't it? 2 out of 3 fail. It shouldn't surprise us that much because there's so many steps where it can actually go off the rails. So how did I address the time, cost, and probability of failure issues in 5 different organizations that I saw? Well, once DataRobot existed, I decided to use a tool that automated model iteration, documentation, deployment, drift monitoring, and retraining. In my own work, my solution was outsourcing that modeling functionality to get our data scientists into more value-creating activities and teaming up with the business on more difficult problems. Our responsibility as leaders is not to measure people by lines of code, but by the answers they actually deliver to the business. So in my learnings as a data leader, I found that there were, these 4 distinct areas where you really didn't need to custom builds. You had off-the-shelf solutions for them. Every minute your data scientists are spending on modeling, documentation, or monitoring is time taken away from experimentation and collaboration with the business to ensure their needs are met. Most people don't think you can automate these things, but you can. All right, so let's talk about modeling. My experience has taught me that data scientists spend more time creating models than they do explaining them, documenting them, or monitoring them over time. Yet you need documented, monitored models that can be explained. This is a big scaling issue. There's an overemphasis on modeling and not enough emphasis on connecting models to product features and the business itself. I think we can all be realistic here. The modeling part isn't the hard part anymore. I mean, yes, like when my team did this manually, this phase always took us the longest time because the chances of you getting a good model on your first try is pretty low. We spend the most time here, but this isn't the area we should be spending the most time on. I've chatted with lots of CTOs who complain that their data science group is basically glorified R&D that sits in a silo and doesn't actually connect in any way to the business. Being able to connect to the business is a huge advantage of being able to outsource that modeling piece. Sorry, it's not working for me. Yeah, there we go, got it. Okay, so in my experience, industrializing a model for prime time is another really big point of failure. That translation piece can either delay your model deployment until it's no longer relevant or kill it entirely. In one of my former roles, we were required to translate our Python models into .NET before anything could be deployed into our IT ecosystem. Since no one on our data science team actually knew .NET and no one on the IT team knew Python, our models often stagnated in this phase and sometimes never deployed. Data science teams are realizing this and coming to the conclusion that they need their own MLOps. So their answer is to create their own shadow IT custom solution, which is an even bigger time and resource suck. And this compounds that hot mess express that we discussed earlier. This is something you as a data leader definitely want to outsource. This is a buy off-the-shelf solution, and we want to make sure it will give you the exporting flexibility you need. Like you want API pulls, you want direct integrations, et cetera. Whoop, sorry. But again, you don't need to do this yourself. So documentation, this is the part that everyone hates, the red-headed stepchild of data science. You need it for compliance, you need it for deployment, you need it for onboarding new people, but no one has the time or the will to do it. From my experience in finance, it's been forced for regulatory reasons, but if you can automate it, why wouldn't you? With documentation automation, my data engineers no longer had to beg us for the information they needed to industrialize the model for prime time. They could now quickly deploy the data science models and could focus more on the data ingest pipes and automation. Then there's also the continuity of AI and ML. This is an overlooked aspect of scaling. Any guesses onto how quickly data scientists churn? How many months? 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years. About 18 months is an average tenure for a data scientist. So someone is going to inherit that model, and I want them to have the information that they need. And any new data scientist who starts needs to have the tooling and the documentation right away so that they can be productive. So drift monitoring and retraining were also really important features to me. I have always been on small, under-resourced teams. They often had no time to do this, and it took time away from solving actual new problems. I also found that in order to save time, my team would just adjust an old model, then rather write a bunch of new code and then see if another model might fit better. While this does save time, model performance of your old model often erodes over time, which makes business users lose faith in your process and your results. Your MLOps platform should give you the ability to challenge and retrain your models and make a recommendation rather than just telling you that there has been drift. Any additional legacy models that you have that were made outside of a platform should be monitored, rigorously tested, and documented. When you're looking to automate this, these are the two functionalities that I would checkbox. So this is how I decided to deal with these problems as a data leader. 3 times over, I went into an organization and ran into this. 3 times over, I realized we needed to optimize. And what I chose every time was the DataRobot platform. Why? I saw success in this 3 times over. I was going to go with the winning solution. I needed to make sure I got quick modeling. I needed to make sure we had MLOps support and continuity of AI and ML. And that's what led me to DataRobot the first time and to success 2 more times after that. It gave my team so many benefits. It gave us the ability to focus on data quality and connecting results to business impact. There was more focus on the data going in, more focus on feature selection and feature reduction techniques, and more time to explain results to decision makers. There was an easier onboarding process for new data scientists of varying skill levels. And the big thing was more time for experimentation. We could quickly try out new ideas to evaluate for feasibility. So one example I love to give here is that I hired 3 MIT undergrad interns who had maybe like a year of college, handed them login credentials to DataRobot, gave them the documentation to DataRobot, and gave them data sets and just said, go in there and play and tell me what you come up with. And each of them came back in a week with like a viable project that we could then turn into our next generation of data products. So it was like that easy to use. I mean, they were smart kids, but it was amazing to just have that pipeline and to have that backlog of products and also have the ability to be able to go to the business and say, we can try out ideas that you have and we can quickly figure out what the level of effort is and whether or not there's a there. All right, so cultural change management. So now you've figured out your architecture. What's your next challenge? It's culture change. This is an often neglected piece of an AI transformation. How do you get those existing users and stakeholders of more analog systems to buy into a new way of doing things? The bottom line is that you're not actually going to be able to scale unless there's trust. There's what you can influence and what you can control. And obviously, as data science leaders, you can control your data science team's efforts. You can control their focus. That helps scale. But then there's the influence piece. You have to consider IT influence, because you probably don't sit underneath the IT umbrella. You have to consider the user influence and your business counterparts. All of that is actually going to take time and trust. You can help IT understand what your needs are and how you plan to address them safely and securely. And you can help lead users to adoption by opening the black box and showing the users what has gone into the model and how that data has influenced a business outcome. So how do you address this problem? You target your buy-in efforts to each group's specific concerns. So for IT, it's important to position your organization as trying to solve for your own problems instead of adding to IT's existing workloads. Often, your IT department is already overwhelmed with business as usual. Limited resources are already constrained, and there's generally a massive backlog of projects. In my experience, you want IT's buy-in on your decision, but you don't want them building anything for you. I've had the most success with including IT leadership in my decision-making process and responding to their concerns directly. A big concern they tend to have, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with, is security and compliance. Will new software you buy keep sensitive data safe? And will new models be vetted over time to ensure that the results are not pointing the organization in the wrong direction? Anticipating these questions and having answers to them is key to getting IT on your side. I'm going to give you a little cheat sheet. So this is what I use when getting IT's buy-in on new software vendors. We have certain requirements and limited resources to achieve our mandate. You list them. We found a vendor that will meet these requirements. They have the following security certs that make us comfortable with using our data within their environment. The environment the vendor has built out establishes guardrails and an audit trail for everything we do, giving a less labor-intensive, more holistic approach to compliance and security. It would cost more to build out and maintain this ourselves than if we outsource this piece. This will not cause more work for IT or disrupt the internal IT ecosystem for the existing lines of business. It'll enable our data scientists to focus on true areas of added value and spend less time on documentation and more administrative tasks while still providing that, holistic approach to compliance and security. And finally, it's not going to be that hard for you to actually deploy this in your ecosystem. There should be very little translation. So for users and executives, in my experience, I've targeted departments based on who is the easiest sell and where I can demonstrate the most value. Each department is going to have a different level of maturity and appetite. Pick the ones that are the low-hanging fruit. That's how you scale AI across your entire company. When I've transformed organizations in the past, I started with business units who were really excited about AI and ML, and then showed that value creation to other more skeptical groups to get them on board. For data scientist buy-in, put your money where your mouth is. As a data scientist, I can say this. Show them the tool and the results. It really helps if you put in some effort here on comparing results of something you yourself have built versus what a tool like DataRobot can do. Be prepared to give your data science team direction on what they will focus on when modeling, documentation, monitoring, and retraining are now automated. This is really, I think this is a really important thing that we forget about, is that a lot of them are worried that you're just going to automate them out of a job, but there's actually more important things for them to focus on, and they may not actually know what those are. So for IT, when IT feels included in decision-making, there's less pushback on all your decisions. This is a great benefit. You're also achieving a level of security for them they'd likely be unable to achieve themselves. Homegrown systems are often less secure than vendor-moderated environments. I was part of pen testing of internal homegrown infrastructure at one particular organization that will remain nameless. Our vendors did much better on the assessments than we did. This shouldn't be that surprising, since those vendors have heavily invested in building, maintaining, and updating infrastructure with strong security and compliance. That's really difficult to do with homegrown systems. For users and executives, showing users how you've changed their lives for the better is a huge, huge win. I can think of one example of figuring out a claims algorithm where we could look at travel insurance claims and figure out when it wasn't actually worth it for someone to adjudicate the claim. And instead, they should just sort of let it go. And it was about like $300. So showing that to claims adjusters and saying, hey, you can just let these go, but we want you to concentrate on the claims that are really complex, like you have to be saved by a helicopter on a mountain. That's the kind of travel insurance that you actually need someone to use their brain for. And then finally, for data scientists, as a data scientist, I was skeptical of using a tool at first. And I stayed overnight one night with two of my comrades, and we created our own neural network. And it took us all night, and we put the same data into DataRobot, and our neural network got a 72 AUC, and the DataRobot one got a 92. And it only took me a few minutes of work. So it was sort of like, do I want my people to be wasting an entire night? Or do I want them to be concentrating on other things? And do I want to be able to do more with less? So in conclusion, the world and the impact of data science is changing. Data scientists were once known as the people who hang out in the dark and code models in a vacuum. But we're now expected to be full stack data scientists. We have to focus on ROI. For the data scientists in the room, we all know it's become easier to code models. Companies want to quantify how much you impact the business, not how many models you can build. And as leaders, we really need to keep our eyes on the prize and focus our limited resources on the pieces of the value chain that give us the biggest bang for buck. The minute we step in, the clock starts for change and impact. We have a limited time frame to drive as much impact as we can. The average CDO has a 2-year tenure, and that's caused by not pushing impactful change fast enough. Data science needs to be directly connected to the business. And I get it. I understand the compulsion to want to keep building everything yourself and ignore everything else. I get it. I love to code. I love creating infrastructure. I kind of liked learning Kubernetes and Docker all night. But with limited staffing, I need my team to concentrate on the things that require more of a human touch. Aligning with the business, interpreting what your models are telling you, and determining business impact, and most importantly, change management. If you focus on those other pieces, you're going to be able to tackle new problems much more quickly and scale. I'm happy to dive deeper one-on-one with any of you at the DataRobot booth on my 3 experiences scaling with DataRobot, and I will be there if you have questions. And Atalia is actually going to be giving a demo there as well for anti-money laundering, I believe. Thank you.